friends, welcome back. My name is Mel and today I have 15 fantasy books that I think would be great to read during spooky season. I know that my channel does have a little bit of horror, but we do read a lot of fantasy around here, so if you are a fantasy reader and you're feeling a little bit of the FOMO because it's spooky season but you don't really like horror or thriller, which is the typical spooky vibes, then I do have some recommendations for y'all. So I've tried to keep this mostly books that I don't hear talked about a lot because I feel like there are some pretty standard ones that you always hear about reading for spooky season, like Ninth House, Atlas Paradox, The Diviners. I feel like all of those are very common, Empire the Vampire, common recommendations to read for spooky season. And so I wanted to try to give you a couple of different recommendations that I think would be good to read during this season. So we have got some fantasy, we've got some science fiction in here too. So I wanted to do it as an SFF. There are only 4 science fiction, so we'll go over those at the end in case you guys are not interested in those. But I guess without further ado, let's just jump into the books. To me, spooky season is about vibes, first and foremost, and then demons, vampires, witches. Those are all things that scream fall to me. Sometimes it's just a cover, sometimes it is honestly just vibes. Not always does it have those elements, but most of the time those are things that I look for during spooky season. And a lot of fantasy has this element as well. It's not just horror. I think there are a decent amount of fantasy books that actually have these elements in them. Some of these are fantasy romance because I feel like a lot of witches and vampires do show up in fantasy romance. So hopefully there's something here for everybody. But the first one is obviously Eska, Along the Razor's Edge by Rob J. Hayes. This one just has a very dark tone that I think is good for spooky season, and it also has demons and an underworld in it that I also think would be great for the fall, for October vibes. This is following Eska, and she is a sorcerer, and sorcerers in this world get their magic by swallowing sources, and you can be attuned to a source, and that means that it's just not going to kill you as fast. If you are not attuned to a source, it can kill you within seconds. And Eska is one of the sorcerers in a king's war, but she was on the wrong side and they were overthrown, and she is now in this prison trying to work her way out. She starts quite young. She's only like 15 at the start of this novel, but it has one of my favorite tropes in it. You guys have heard me shout about Eska before. This is not a new recommendation on my channel, but hopefully it's one that you don't hear very often in the context of spooky season. Next up, we have one that's older, and the sequel just came out for this, so I actually may try to read it myself during spooky season. It's not a book that I ever thought would get a sequel, but it is one that I loved when I read it, and that is An Unkindness of Magicians by Kat Howard. You can't really see the cover super well, it blends in, but this is a urban fantasy-esque. It is set in our world, but it doesn't feel urban to me, or at least it didn't when I read it. Full disclosure, I did read this quite a long time ago, but basically there are a bunch of these warring witch families that all have different like affinities, and every 10 or 20 years, it may even be 100, I don't fully remember, but every so over odd years they have a competition to see which house is going to be the ruling house of all of the witches in this area, and Sydney is one of the competitors this year. It's every 20 years, it does say that on here. And Sydney is an unknown magician from a candidate house, and she is an outsider that is easily dismissed, while the unseen world will soon learn that Sydney is a formidable duelist with power that hasn't been seen in decades. She has a score to settle. Obviously, witches give me fall vibes. I loved this book when I read it, and it is definitely not a Mel book, so if you normally don't vibe with my recommendations, you might still like this one, because even though I loved it, the writing style is just not what you would typically expect for me to enjoy, and I do really want to read the sequel. It was like 4 years in between this one and the sequel, but I'm a little bit nervous, so we'll see if I get to it this spooky season. Next up, we have The Library of the Unwritten by AJ Hackwith. This one is for those people that want something a little bit spooky, but you want more like humor and more of a up tone than a grimdark tone. I think this would work for you. You would think that the Library of the Unwritten, which is a library in the underworld that houses all of the unfinished books, would be spooky, but it really wasn't. Basically, this is about a library that's in hell that houses unwritten books, and one of those unwritten books basically comes to life and makes it into our world, and they're scrambling trying to get this book back where it belongs. And this is basically the Devil's Bible, and they're all trying to get the Devil's Bible back where it belongs so that there's not a power struggle between heaven and hell. I wanted to like this one more than I did. I think it was the quirky tone that got me a little bit because I was expecting it to be dark, but if that's what you're looking for, then I think you could really enjoy this. It is a trilogy, and I believe it's completely finished now. Next up, we have Stormfront by by Jim Butcher. This is an urban fantasy and it involves obviously a wizard, and I don't know, Jim Butcher vibes just give me vibes of fall and spooky season. I will definitely be reading one of the Dresden Files books during spooky season myself. This is following obviously Dresden, who is a wizard for hire. He is basically a private investigator and goes off and does his own thing, but he always keeps roped into things that are way above his pay grade and ends up working with the police force on a case. And this is a very monster of the week type story, at least is where I'm at right now. I think I'm 9 books in. It's like a 25 book series, but they can be read as mostly standalones. I wouldn't necessarily pick up book 7 if you haven't read book 1, but if you read book 1, it should complete the story enough that you're satisfied with it, I guess is what I'm getting at. But obviously this involves sorcerers. Sorcerers to me give me very fall vibes. There are demons, there are angels. It's just a fun series. Be aware that Dresden does have like a male gaze that's pretty prominent, so if that's something that really bothers you, maybe don't read this, but it was easy to overlook for me, and so I've just been having fun with them. Next up we have a fantasy romance, and that is Bewitched by Laura Thalassa. This is involving a witch, obviously with Bewitched. This is in the same world as her Bargainer series, although I don't feel like you need to read the Bargainer series in order to read this one. It's following Celine, who is a witch, and she is trying to get into a coven, but she keeps missing out, told that she's not powerful enough, and so in order to get into the most elite coven, she has to go on a witch quest. And this witch quest leads her to the Amazon, where she unearths a man that she shouldn't have unearthed, who is convinced that she is his queen, and he is kind of coming after her. There's also murder mystery plot in here. Definitely gives me fall vibes. I had fun with this one. I won't say that it's like one of my favorite fantasy romances ever, but I did have fun with this, and I know a lot of people love it. So if you're looking for a witchy read that is not as quirky as some of the other fantasy romance, think like Juliet Cross to me feels a little bit more quirky than serious. This one is a tad more on the serious side, so hopefully you enjoy it. Next up we have The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. I don't think this one's going to come to anyone as a huge surprise, but I absolutely love this book. It is vampires, but it is a unique take on vampires. It's not your traditional suck blood, kill humans kind of thing. This is following Araya, who is the daughter of the King of the Night. The caveat is she's human, and she is going to enter into these trials to try to be able to gain more power so that she doesn't have to feel like this frail human in a world full of vampires. And this book just has everything that I wanted. It's got a great slow burn, great banter, good enemies to lovers-ish, a competition, really good family vibes, a good friendship. Like, this has everything that I ever could have wanted in it, and I think it is a great read for fantasy romance lovers that want to read something not as spooky for spooky season. Next up we have The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. Full disclosure, I have not read book 3. This is a completed trilogy. I'm not sure if I'm gonna like it past book 1, but I do recommend book 1 for spooky season because this was involving bone shard magic, and basically you take a bone from somebody's ear and you are able to create constructs out of bone that move around and do whatever they're inscribed to do. This is a multi-perspective fantasy story, but it seems like it would be perfect for fall to me because constructs, bone creatures, sounds like a perfect fall read. It is a world where there are set on islands, and the islands keep like breaking apart, and they're afraid that the world is going to drown, and that's why this is called the Drowning Empire. And we are following the daughter of the emperor, who is the only one that has the bone shard magic, but she's learning how to do it in order to take over for him. Then we have one that I didn't personally like, but I do know people that liked it, and it does give me fall vibes, so I did want to mention it, and that is The City of Dusk by Tara Sim. This has shadow magic in it. It has underworld type situations. There are gods, and it just gives me fall vibes. This did not work for me, mostly because it felt very rushed and just didn't have enough depth, and so I didn't love it, but I do know that like Ashley from Frolic Third Fiction loved it. Did not feel like it was YA in the slightest, but I would recommend it to people that are looking for a story like this to at least give it a try. This is about 4 realms: life, death, light, and darkness, and they all converge in the City of Dusk. It's ruled by 4 noble houses of the Nexus, and this world is starting to like crumble, and these houses are in a political war to try to figure out who is going to be in charge, and their heirs are working together, I guess. It's kind of a hard book to explain. It is quite long, but I think that it could work if you're looking for gods and shadow magic and things like that for the fall season. Next up, we have A Touch of Light by Tiago Abdallah. This is obviously one of my favorite indie fantasy books. I think that it is well crafted. I think that it is fun, but also has some dark moments, and it has an element of zombies, and these are magically created zombies, and that's why I think that it would be great for the fall. Plus, like, that cover, it just screams fall fall to me. Look at this tree. This tree is in autumn. It is autumn in this book. It's not. I don't know if it's autumn in this book, but it feels like it is. This is following a couple of different characters. We have one who is the son of a king and he is trying to get revenge for his dead lover. We have another woman who is a part of a tribe and she has magic that allows her to feel and project the emotions of others. And then we have a knight griffin rider who is part of the like holy warriors. Warriors is not a good way to put it, but she's as part of the holy crew in a world where they believe that the goddess doesn't really want to acknowledge death, and death is something that you kind of push aside, and if you are meant to live, you will continue to live, and they don't really believe in like life and death in the traditional sense, but there are magical zombies in this, which is why I think that it would be great for the fall season. My camera battery's dying. Oh no. Okay, next up we have Winds of Strife by U.G. Gutman. You guys have seen me recommend this before. This also has witches, and it is following our main character, Nye, who is working for the king and trying to exterminate all witches. And witches are women who have magic, but men who have magic are okay. Women just can't handle it, essentially. This world involves emotion magic, where you are able to use different emotions to create different forms of magic. I thought that that was really cool. It is a hard magic system, and obviously witches and dark, morally gray revenge story gives me all the fall vibes. Then we have one with a murder mystery, which just feels fall to me, and that is The Swordsmans Lament by G.M. White. This is following an older king's guardsman, and he is accused of killing the king's son, and so he is trying to scramble to figure out who actually killed the king's son and clear his name. I really enjoyed this. It is short if you're looking for something just quick murder mystery to get you through the fall season, and I think that it was really well written, and I'm excited to try the sequel at some point. I think that that is all of the fantasy, the 10 fantasy that I wanted to recommend to you guys, or I guess 11 fantasy. So let me quickly go through some of the science fiction that I think would also be good for spooky season. The first one is Vengeful by V.E. Schwab. For some reason, superheroes to me just give me fall vibes. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because I typically associate superheroes with going back to school, and I don't know why that is, but for some reason, superheroes give me fall vibes. Plus, the book is red, and red also gives me fall vibes. This is following Eli and Victor, and they are trying to gain powers, and the way that they're going to gain powers is by coming like to the brink of death and coming back to life again. And this is a morally gray type story. These two characters are definitely not both good guys, and they end up in a battle between one another, and there are going to be people that get caught in the crossfire. I do want to read the sequel to this, Vengeful. It's actually on my list to read in October, so I wanted to recommend the first book in the series to you guys for the fall. My camera battery is going to die. Hang on, let me switch that out. Okay, I think I got that angle about right again. Next up, we have a horror sci-fi, which is Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. This one is set on a spaceship, and it's basically From Below by Darcy Coates, only in space. So if you liked that book, maybe give this one a try. It's following our main character who is on her last voyage, and she is then going to be grounded, and she's really struggling with that because of some things that happened in her past. And she sets out on, again, her last voyage on this spaceship, and they come upon a cruise ship, essentially, a spaceship cruise ship for the elite and the rich that was thought to have been destroyed and went missing like 10 or 15 years ago. And so they're like, well, dang, we can go onto this ship and loot everything and consider it our find, and we're going to get all of the riches off of this when we bring it home. But when they go to investigate, things do not go right, and there are some horrors on that ship. It's told in past and present point of view when you're flipping back and forth between when this happened and now her being interrogated in the present, and I enjoyed it. I thought that it was fun. I will definitely read from S.A. Barnes in the future. It's just a quick, easy read if you're looking for something for spooky season. Then this one is kind of obvious. I will give you that this one is kind of obvious, but I could not go without recommending Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Absolutely incredible, amazing, twisted sci-fi thriller, perfect for spooky season. It's not necessarily a horror book, but I don't know, it just gives me all of the vibes. And basically, this is about Jason, who hears, "Are you happy with your life?" before a masked abductor knocks him unconscious. He's living another life. It is the life that he always dreamed, or is it his actual life? And then he is forced to confront like the darkest horrors of his past to get out of this. I don't really want to tell you a lot more than that because this book is wild, but I loved it. Highly recommend, if you have not read anything from Blake Crouch, that you pick this up in October. Oh, two more to go. I missed a fantasy. We'll get to that in just a second. But the last sci-fi horror that I have to recommend is Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. I think about this book all the time. I can't really think of any other book that I think about and recommend as easily as I do this one. When I originally read it, I think I gave it a 3 or a 4 star, but ever since then it has really, really stuck with me because it felt so realistic to me. This is about a mockumentary that goes out into, I think it's the Mariana Trench, and they are going to be filming a mockumentary for mermaids when things don't go right and the ship disappears. Footage does make it back, but it's really hard to understand what's going on. The mockumentary and the TV series don't want it getting out, but one of the marine biologist's sister was on board, and so she wants to make another voyage out there to try to figure out what happened to her sister. So they gather like mercenaries and marine biologists and linguistics and all of these different people to get on this ship to go investigate the mockumentary's demise, essentially. And obviously things don't go well when they go to do that. They don't go well at all. But to me, the science was just woven into this so well amidst the horror. It definitely is sciencey enough that if you are like, I don't like science, I don't like it, it gives me a headache, you may not enjoy this because it is pretty science heavy in the beginning. The horror definitely comes in the second half. But if you can push through a little bit of boredom in the very beginning of the book, I think it is definitely worth it. I loved all of it, but I can see where people would be a little bored, especially in the beginning. But I think it's incredibly well done. I know sci-fi readers that don't really like horror that have loved this, so I hope that you're able to give it a try and love it as well. And then the last one that I wanted to recommend is Daughter of Redwender by Ed McDonald. The sequel is about to come out, though I have not heard the best things about the sequel, and I think that this one ended well enough for me. Like, I don't necessarily feel like I absolutely have to have a sequel, but this one is about ghosts. And it's about Rain. She can speak to the dead. It's a gift that comes with a death sentence, and all her life she has hidden away. But in a rare act of kindness, she decides to rescue a woman and bring her into the stronghold because the woman is fleeing from Redwender, which is a fortress for warrior magicians who answer to no king and will stop at nothing to reclaim what she's stolen. So she is having to go live amongst them now, and obviously this gives me spooky season Halloween vibes because it involves ghosts, but this is definitely a fantasy, not an urban fantasy. It is a fantasy world. It's not our world, but it involves ghosts, and I had a good time with it, so I would recommend it. They just keep stacking higher and higher. Oh my gosh. I recommended too many books. You can no longer see me. But here are the books that I recommend for spooky season. I might have, oh my god, gone a little bit overboard on these. Whoops. I hope that you found something in this huge stack to enjoy in the month of October or even just in the fall season. I really enjoyed most of these books, and so if you decide to pick any up or if you have any recommendations for fantasy books to read during spooky season, please leave them down in the comments below because I want them, and I'm sure if you're here, other people want them too. If you just want to let me know that you were here and hanging out, leave me a skull emoji for spooky season. Thank you guys so very much for hanging out with me. As always, links to my Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads are all in the description box down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!